Hey, good evening, Bulls fans. This is John McQuinney and Matt Gritzmacher from UBBullRun.com. Uh, we moved our usual Sunday night podcast to Tuesday night. Both of us kind of had long weekends. We thought it'd be best we just kind of pushed it off a couple of days. So after this is kind of a one-time only thing, we'll get back on our normal schedule as the weeks go on here. Uh, Quite a bit to talk about. I think just about every team was in action besides, I think, women's tennis. I think men's tennis, rowing, swimming, diving, men's soccer, women's soccer, cross country and track, or excuse me, cross country, not track and field. Track and field's in the spring. Um, so I guess we'll start with swimming and diving. They're at Florida Gulf Coast University. Uh, it was well, excuse me, they were split between Florida Gulf Coast and the Western New York Invite, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Then,
And the West New York Invite is their own thing. It's basically them, Bonaventure, and Niagara, and maybe someone else, but yeah, it's their own thing.
all right. So, anywho, the Florida Gulf Coast Invite, there were some of the top, I believe, Ohio State, a couple other big name schools were there.
I think Florida Gulf Coast themselves are a big name school. I know they went as a team to the NCAA championships last year, and I should have known this already, but I think they're in the SEC for swimming. Which, yeah, that's what I had to say.
Yeah, which, if I remember correctly, I think they dominated in just about every single event that I saw.
I know that their pool is outside, so that's pretty neat.
Well, when you're in the middle of Florida, I guess you can afford to do that. Unlike here, if you did that outside, you'd be diving into a brick of ice.
Yeah.
For most of the season. But what we kind of learned from that,
not the SEC, sorry. They're in a sport-specific conference called the Coastal Collegiate Swimming Association.
So what we kind of learned was that a lot of the freshmen are the real deal. On the men's side, Mason Miller in the 100 butterfly and in the 100 freestyle, both had a top time for both events. On the women's side, there were a few freshmen that we talked about last week, and I think the week before. Julia Box and Mallory Buha both had the top times in the 100, 200, 100 and 200 butterfly, and the 100 and 200 backstroke. Both of them are really good. So can you tell that John is totally unprepared to talk today? Matt, take it away.
There's not a whole lot to learn from this weekend of swimming and diving. It's the opening weekend. A lot like cross country, to a lesser extent track and field, but a lot like cross country or track and field. The only meets that really matter start with the MAC championships, late February, early March. And if you do well there, and you have more meets that matter, and that's true in cross country and track and field as well. Over the course of the season, it's important to put up good times, both so that you qualify for the MAC championships and so that you can hit these NCAA cut times, which if you hit the A cut time, you get an automatic berth in the championships. And if you hit the B cut time, you're on the provisional list if enough people don't get an A cut time. UB last year had about a dozen people hit B cut times. Nobody has hit an A cut in a while. But for the first week especially, swimming and diving times themselves aren't something to really look at. I did my preview posts based off of their all-time best times. And all of these times were across the board seconds slower than that. But you did highlight, Julia Box and Mallory Buha, who are very versatile, very fast swimmers coming into the women's side. Mason Miller is a little less versatile, but he's instantly UB's fastest 100 freestyle and their fastest 100 butterfly guy. In addition to those three, on the women's side, Catherine Schultheis, another freshman, had a real strong day across the board. She looks like she can slot in effectively in among the kind of relay teams at both the freestyle sprints, and she put down a pretty solid butterfly time. Also, a freshman, Maddie Jakumski, looked real good in the backstroke. And then two transfers I want to highlight. One on the women's side, Sarah Baxter from Penn State. She did well in the 100 butterfly. She was UB's top swimmer in the 200 individual medley. She's someone who has competed last year in 3 events in the Big Ten championships. And as much as we like on the site to talk about football as football, you jump in a pool, the situations are the same every time, but you are in a bigger kind of setting. And so Sarah Baxter coming in from Penn State looks like she's going to be useful across a number of events. On the men's side, there's a fellow named Nick Hooper, who is not a freshman but transferred in from Old Dominion. And I don't think he really stood out compared to everyone else. I don't think his times in the past justify anything, but he was UB's second fastest on the weekend in the 500 free and the 200 free. And I think the UB men have a lot of guys who are kind of middling in the longer freestyle distances and also compete to a middling extent in the individual medleys. And Hooper looks like another one of those, but he looked good. He looked better than I thought he would. The only real big takeaway to bring out of this, other than a loose understanding of where the depth chart is right now, is we did see one NCAA B cut in Itai de la Vega, the 100 breaststroke, which I don't quite know how highly regarded he was coming out of his prep career in Israel last year. It was a bit of a surprise when he set the school record in the breaststroke last year and hit an NCAA B cut pretty earlier in the season. This year, it's less of a surprise. It is nice to see in the first meet. If he's already hitting that time, he swam a 55.29 in the 100 breast. If he's already hitting that, you can expect, that to drop by a couple seconds, and maybe an 8 cut is in the works, if not this year, in the future, which would be really nice to see. UB did send Brittany Paris to nationals a few years ago, but that was on the basis of her getting in as an alternate, not of her forcing her way in with an 8 cut. That's kind of everything there is to know about swimming and diving. They have a really funky schedule. Obviously, you might not have expected them to start the first week of October, but they do. And what they do is they compete every weekend in October at one thing in November, and then take 6 weeks off through December and early January. And then through January and February, they compete regularly, and the MAC championships are late February, early March. So it's a long season with not a whole lot of competitions, but they're not competing this coming weekend. And then on Saturday the 17th, they will host Cornell, both the men and the women. So probably be saying something similar 2 weeks from now. Here's what we know. It doesn't mean much until we're looking at kind of January and February time, where hopefully the teams are peaking. But it'll be good to see the times drop and get a better idea of the pecking order. Right now, the newcomers delivered like we hoped they would. They look like impact recruits. And Itai de la Vega delivered like we knew that he would. He showed up last year, and he's already setting the scene now. Another team that got their start this weekend, and I'm just going to run through this because John and I always kind of look at rowing and don't really know how to talk about them and how to give them their fair shake. But rowing started their season with just a small couple of races against Canisius and D'Youville on their home course of Tonawanda Creek. And rowing, when I first started paying attention to all UB sports versus just basketball and football, rowing was coming off of a CAA championship the year they won that. And they've kind of been on a downhill slide from there. And just in how they matched up against Canisius this weekend, it seems like they've fallen a little bit further behind the Golden Griffins than they were last year. I could throw out the times, but I don't even have them in front of me, and they wouldn't really mean anything anyway. The Varsity 8 group, which is that's the most frequent race, is a group of 8, finished second to Canisius. And then the boats of 4, UB's boat won, but I don't know if Canisius or D'Youville entered any boats there. I just know that UB's first boat won that race against, at a minimum, UB's other 2 boats. So rowing is underway. their fall schedule also means nothing in the grand scheme of things. And again, nothing really matters until their conference championships late in the spring. But they are in action this coming weekend at the head of the Housatonic Regatta in New Haven, Connecticut. So I always enjoyed regattas. Went to school in Boston where the head of the Charles is a pretty big deal, especially around this time of year. It's nice to go, and there's apple cider and it's like a festival environment. So regattas are fun, but it's hard to add a lot of context to rowing. So they raced, and that's kind of all we're ever going to be able to tell you about them from week to week. With that, John, we've gotten the two teams making their debuts out of the way. I want to save men's tennis and cross country to the end because I thought they had the most impressive weekends. But who do you want to talk about next?
I guess we'll start with women's soccer. Since we last spoke, they had 2 matches, both on the road at Eastern Michigan and at Bowling Green. Looking at our notes, it says EMU, yay, BG, boo, which I think that's a very succinct and apt description of their last 2 games. Eastern Michigan was a 1-0 win off of a Julia Benatti goal. And Bowling Green was a very odd and frustrating 2-1 loss. The EMU win, I guess all I can really say is Julia Benatti got a goal. UB only took 11 shots during the whole entire game, which kind of a low number, but
I'm okay with 1-0 win. This team isn't playing with the lead as much as they did last year, so I'm okay with. What's that, John?
Oh, never mind. Finish your thought.
Oh, this team is not playing with the lead as much last year. And as we'll talk about in the Bowling Green game, and as we saw in the Niagara game, they don't necessarily take advantage of the situations when they're there. So when they do take advantage of a situation, take that lead, I'm okay with them bunkering down a bit. I don't know what the distribution of the shots was in the EMU game, but I'm okay with 11 shots if we got the win. Not a lot to say. We didn't have video for either of these 2 games this weekend. They were on the road. We had live stats. We didn't have working live stats for the first half of the EMU game, but Benatti was the most dangerous bull on the field for sure. She had the best chance of the game prior to her goal in the first half, where she got a shot from less than 6 yards away and put it right into the goalie, which, whether she flubbed it or not, for a goalie to make any save from 6 yards away is pretty good no matter what. And she finished with 4 shots, which led the team in that game. You know, you can look at 11 shots, and that's a bit low, but they did put 6 of them on goal, which is better than they've managed in the in other games. Bowling Green game, kind of a script. You know, if you be winning a narrow game because their offense couldn't quite convert all of their chances, but managed one and the defense held, that's one script that we're seeing this season. The other script we're seeing is UB giving up the lead in whatever fashion, you know, against the run of play, perhaps in the run of play, perhaps on a kind of fluky play, not quite being the lockdown focused team that they were last year, giving up the lead, furiously trying to equalize the game. They've managed it against Niagara. They've managed it against Bowling Green. They did manage it. We'll get to that. And then in other games, they haven't managed it. Against St. Bonaventure, they dominated and weren't able to equalize. Against Ohio second half and weren't able to equalize. Against Bowling Green and Niagara, they came out strong and were able to get one across. Against Bowling Green, they ended up giving a goal. Technically, it's the 89th minute, but it came at 88:59, so it's basically the final minute of the game. And we don't really know what happened other than it was a bouncing ball that somehow went over Laura Dougal, which I don't know if she was on the ground having dove already or misplayed it or what, but she's 6'1", and it's awful hard for something to go over her. This is a game where, you know, we've talked about the women's inconsistency, and they seem to have shaken that. Before this game, their defense had really locked down for a while, and their offense was getting more chances, if not finishing them. And this is a game where that kind of the weak points of that strategy hurt them. You know, they had to play from behind. They did get a goal back from Carissima Catrona. That's her second of the year. So finally, we have a second goal scorer in addition to Benatti, who has multiple goals on the season. And then they gave up that go-ahead goal again late in the game. And really, for the entire game, and especially in the second half, UB outplayed Bowling Green. The first half was relatively even. In the second half, Bowling Green scored 4 minutes in, and UB took 17 shots in the second half alone. And I think they got 6 corners in the second half alone. And that's too many chances to only get 1 goal. You know, that's just there's no reason that Bowling Green should have gotten a win in this game, let alone a tie. 5 corner kicks in the second half alone, which if we got 5 corner kicks in a game, I'd be pretty pleased with that. It would mean that we had the ball deep in Bowling Green's end. I'm not necessarily upset that Bowling Green scored 2. You know, it's a bummer. Nobody in the match should score more than 1 on us, but it happens. I am upset that with 23 shots, only 6 of them made it on target, and that only turned into 1 goal. 17 shots in the second half must have been absolutely unreal, and somehow in the second half. And the 2 goals were the only 2 that were even on target. So I don't know. I don't know how that happens because we didn't have video, but that's as discouraging a loss as St. Bonaventure. But the performance there was as good as any we've seen in terms of possession and being able to threaten the opposing net. I don't know if it's focus. I doubt it's strategy. I just think that I don't know without any video. They've had some times earlier in the season where they could get burned with some lackluster passing in the middle of the field, and all of a sudden they don't have numbers back on defense. But without having seen anything, it does seem like the winning goal was a bit of a fluke from what we can tell. But I don't have anything more, John. 17 shots in the second half and only 1 goal is just not. If you're doing that, you're giving away way too many chances.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned the Eastern Michigan game. UB took 11 shots, 6 were on goal. Against Bowling Green, they took 23 shots, only 6 were on goal. And Bowling Green only took 11 shots, had 5 on goal, 2 went in, and they took 3 shots in the second half and scored 2 goals off of those 3 shots.
Yep,
And I guess that's kind of the most discouraging thing to me. And it's games like this where when UB doesn't score first and they're playing from behind, they can't really do that lockdown, knockdown, drag out defensive style of game because they have to put so much pressure on the offense to score a goal. Just to tie the game.
Yeah.
I think, gosh, I forget which game it was.
In general, they're devoting fewer resources to the offensive attack this year than they did last year.
I think.
I think that's wise. I think that's wise, and I think they're still generating enough chances. But last year, we would see Courtney Mann further up than we're seeing Krista Markevich play this year. And we would see both Julia Benatti and Cassidy Kidd work closer to the box off the wing. Of course, last year we could also see Katie Roberts pretty much hold down the middle of the attacking third on her own, and Selena Carrero work off a little differently. They're still getting chances even when they do. I don't know. It's all there in pieces. It just hasn't come together. This most recent game is just an example of it not coming together even more spectacularly than previous games where it didn't come together. I think really, if we remember my preseason stuff, talking about Selena Carrero, she had 7 assists and 2 goals last year, I think. Real strong season, one of the top in the conference in assists. She took a lot of shots and was very dangerous, but she didn't always get them on target. And I expected that to change. I expected her to continue to be able to find space. And instead, we've lost Katie Roberts, and we've really lost people who can get shots on net. Cassidy Kidd's a bit snake bitten. She's hit 4 or 5 posts this season. Julia Benatti is really the only person who can consistently get a shot on net. Carissa Catrona, the videos that I've seen, when I've been able to see a game, she gets in there, and I can think of 5 different times she's put a shot right into the goalie. And we're halfway through the season, a little over halfway. So it's there. It's there. But it's got to happen. I was really pleased after the first game of the weekend that Central Michigan beat Miami. And so all of a sudden, UB 2 and was back and only 1 game out of the top of the conference with Ball State, with games against Miami and Ball State still upcoming. Now UB's 2-2, and we're in the same spot that we were before this past weekend. And next game is on the road against Western Michigan, who doesn't look to have had a drop-off from their appearance in the MAC final last year. The good news is that after Western Michigan, we get a few more home games. So that's encouraging. But we'll see what happens Friday night. But all of a sudden, this Western Michigan, we really need it. I think we need at least a tie out of this Western Michigan game, just as fans, to feel, like they're moving in the right direction, because it feels like it's just so inconsistent from weekend to weekend right now. And they're going to make the MAC tournament. That's the top 8 teams. They're going to make that fine. They're most likely going to earn a top 4 seed in at least a home playoff. But then the number 1 seed hosts the semifinals and championship game. And right now, I bet that's Ball State or Western Michigan, but probably Ball State. I think Ball State is a little bit more talented than Western Michigan. And, you only need to, with Dougal and a strong defense, you don't necessarily need to be great to win 3 games in the MAC tournament. But this team just doesn't, it's tough to see them as a front runner anymore. I still think they're in the top group of teams in the MAC, but it's tough to see them as a front runner. John, I'm ready to move on, but I've also talked for a bit. So if you have anything more to say, we're not interrupting each other like we usually do. And
yeah,
it's just off.
I think we can move on to something a little less saddening. Move on to men's soccer, and they had only 1 match since we last spoke. And they played St. Bonaventure, and Bonaventure, as you guarantee to win against Bonaventure, and luckily that one came true. That guarantee held up, unlike some of your other guarantees in the past.
Yeah, so I'm 1-3 on guarantees this year, which 1-2, excuse me, which is pretty bad. But when Mallory Buha breaks the 100 butterfly record, then I'll be 2-2 on guarantees.
Oh,
and
not too bad.
I think that's all I've said right now.
No.
But yeah, men's soccer in Bonaventure, woohoo!
Yeah, they went in first half, only took 5 shots. It was tied at halftime. Then something happened during halftime, and they drank Michael Jordan's special stuff, and they came out and they scored 6 goals on 12 shots. I kind of did a double take on my phone when I saw like the updates that kept rolling in. I mean, all around, Russell Cicerone had 2 goals and 3 assists. A absolutely dominant performance by Cicerone, I think.
Yeah. Last year, UB was bad but improving. Bonaventure was bad. Cicerone was pretty good. Cicerone scored 2 and assisted on 2 in a 4-0 win. This year, UB's gotten quite a bit better. Cicerone's gotten quite a bit better. St. Bonaventure's gotten quite a bit worse. And Cicerone scored 2 and assisted on 3 in a 6-0 win. By points, 7 points, 2 goals for 4 points and 3 assists. That's a best game by a UB individual since 2006. And it's the first hat trick since 2009. Or it's not a hat trick, but by points, by goals, it's tied for the best, of course. There's a couple other times he's had 2 goals. 11. But point being, by total points, last time anybody had 7 was Andre Clark in 2006. And before that, we're talking 20, 30 years. Just a huge night from Cicerone. He is, this year, becoming an absolute all-around force. He's got a career high in assists already, which is a big deal because last year and at times this year, it feels like when UB is down, they just get the ball on his feet and try to see if he can do something. This year, he's up to, let's see if I can do this quickly. I think he's up to 7 assists.
Cicerone?
Yeah.
He has 6.
So
he is tied for 4th in the nation in assists and is tied for 6th in the nation with 8 goals.
Yeah, he's one of the best in the country. He's tied with Bowling Green's Pat Flynn right now in overall points. And I think Pat Flynn is overrated, and I think Bowling Green is overrated. And after I've said that, but we tied them last year when everyone was going gaga over Pat Flynn, and it seems silly. But on the all-time books, I think Russell is up to 5th in goals and 5th in points in the UB books. And assists, he's probably a bit lower, but he's certainly, I think he's 9th in assists. Let me pull up the recap here. Cicerone ranks 6th all-time in, that's in a game. 5th place on the all-time goals list with 24. 6th place for points in a career with 59. And, you know, in addition to Cicerone, Adoni scored, Cramarosa scored. I think Scales scored again. Scales is having one hell of a season. Braden Scales, yep. Braden Scales, you know, preseason I was kind of like, I don't know what to expect from this midfield. We've got more offensive talent. We've got a handful of guys who have started and competed. Ryan Pereira was injured preseason and hasn't played a minute and probably won't play a minute this whole year. And between Braden Scales, Braden Culver, and Dylan Cope, I don't know who I would have left out, but I liked Culver and Cope the best of the 4, really, including Pereira. And Scales has shown up in a big way. I closed my statistics page, but you probably still have it open. Scales. Oh, goodness.
Scales has 3 goals, 4 assists.
Yeah, which I would bet is more than his entire career prior to this season. Yeah, he had 1 goal last year, and that was it. So he's got 15 shots this year after 5 shots in his first 2 seasons. He's having a big year. Back to Cicerone while I get this other page to load. I said, you know, he's up to 5th points, they're telling me right now. He has a great shot of moving up to really to 2nd in goals. I don't think he can catch Steve Butcher, who's at 48. But he's at 24 goals now. He'll almost certainly get up to 3rd by the end of his career. 3rd place is at 28. He's got a pretty good chance. 2nd place is 33. You know, he's got a real good shot at that. In assists, he's I don't think he's quite as high, but the assist number is much lower, only 19 career assists. So if he has another season like he does next year, he could get up into the top 2 or 3 in assists. And in points, he's already at 6th with 58. He'll probably move into top 3 in points by the end of this season. Again, he won't catch Steve Butcher at number 1, but he should in his career catch Mark Brown for number 2. And so in an era where scoring across college soccer is wildly down, Steve Butcher played at the turn of the millennium, and in both men's and women's soccer, scoring was legitimately 3 to 4 times the rate that it is now. You see it. UB's all-time leading scorer on the women's side is Paul Listrani, maybe. She scored, 25 goals in a season once. Just tons of points all over the place. Steve Butcher was the last person before Russell to score 10 in a season, and that was 15 years ago. So barring this one guy in an era where goal scoring was way up, Cicerone's going to go down as the second best offensive player in the history of UB soccer. And thank goodness we still have another season from him, but he's already among the best, not just for flashy 1 goals here and there or taking UB's penalty kicks and racking up his numbers there, but he's an absolute star. He'll be an absolute star next year, and we'll talk about this at another time, but Major League Soccer is the floor for him as a professional. Whether he jumps into it immediately from Buffalo or not, I don't know, but he will play in Major League Soccer, and I would not be all surprised to see him play in a higher league, which would mean Europe, which is cool to think about. Men's soccer is now done with their conference play, or a non-conference play.
Out of conference.
Yeah.
Play.
And so now we go to the MAC, which everyone across the MAC is better this year than they were last year. I was thinking based on last year's results and UB's own improvement, they could compete for 3rd this year. And I said they really need to make it in the MAC tournament to set themselves up for next year when Cicerone is a senior, give them some experience of postseason play. And I was really hoping for 3rd because Akron was going to win the conference, and you can avoid Akron for a game. Akron, I thought, was going to drop off. They're better than they were last year. They're sitting at number 8 in the country right now. They might move up. They beat Santa Clara 2-0 tonight. Western Michigan returned literally their entire team and was ranked at least in the top drawer soccer poll. I don't know about the official poll. Last I checked, they were in the teens. Bowling Green spent some time in the rankings this year. They might have dropped off now. They lost to Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois beat Bowling Green, and then the other team is West Virginia, who has the Big 12 budget. And so all of a sudden, UB could be way better and could miss the MAC tournament by a long shot. UB is way better this year. There's no doubt about it. But everyone in the MAC is much improved over last year, and Buffalo starts the season with Akron on Saturday?
Friday,
we'll cautiously say. So
no, but yeah, Friday at home again.
So Friday, UB Stadium, number 8 Akron. The good news is UB's got 3 home games in conference play this year, while the women are on the downside of the flip-flop, home road flip. The men get 3 of their 5 conference games at home, which will hopefully mean something. But it's going to be tough. Everyone in the MAC looks good this year, and Akron on Friday is ranked 8th in the country. So,
well, for what it's worth, the men are 4-1-1 at home, 1-3-2 away.
That's a good point.
Well, who knows?
And that one loss is Lafayette, which is fine. Lafayette's a good team. Last year, UB played Akron and West Virginia without Russell Cicerone. He sprained his ankle early in the West Virginia game and didn't play against West Virginia, might have played like 20 minutes against Akron. So maybe. I don't think that the UB men have the defensive responsibility that the women did in shutting down West Virginia for 90-plus minutes. But maybe Cicerone gets a goal early out of something. Or someone else, but it would probably be Cicerone. And we see what happens.
The Doney effect.
The Doney effect. That's kind of slowed down. He did score a goal against Bonaventure, and he did have 2 assists against, who was it? Cornell. But we haven't seen as much of him as we did earlier in the season. So we haven't been able to use the Donny effect, but that's okay. Volleyball, 1-1 on the weekend, and compared to women's soccer's 1-1, we're very, very pleased with volleyball's 1-1 on the weekend. They're now 2-2 in the MAC after winning just one of their first 12 or 13 matches to start the season. They've now won 2 of 3. Their opening MAC loss to Akron was a little unfortunate, 4-set loss, but then they came out and beat Toledo without too much trouble, which Toledo's a bad MAC program and cautious. They lost to Miami without too much of a fight to open last weekend, but Miami's a good program who I think are on the up and up within the MAC. And I thought that UB played pretty well against Miami, even in the loss. And then they came out and they beat Bowling Green without too much trouble at all. Really, they dropped one set, but they hit 183 for the match, which is a little low by objective standards, but by UB standards is pretty good. They continue to find more diverse offense than they did in the beginning of the season. They had 4 people above double-digit kills against Bowling Green. Megan Lipsky is absolutely on fire. All preseason we said we need Megan Lipsky to really produce this year, and all of a sudden she's doing it. She's got double-digit kills in I think 6 of her last 7 matches, including 17 against Bowling Green, and she's doing it. She's all of a sudden the leading and most efficient attacker on the team, which is really good. Volleyball.
Yeah, another thing I think we talked about last week was Marissa Prinsbach. And I think Coach Lipsitz mentioned this in the post-game interview after Toledo, that maybe it wasn't Coach Lipsitz, maybe it was Megan Burnett, or someone mentioned Marissa's setting and just how well she's been playing. And seeing Prinsbach and Lipsky doing so well these past few matches, it's really started to show out on the court. Like you said, the other Bulls that were in double-digit kills were freshman Megan Wernett yet again, freshman Felicia Watkins, and Cassie Shadow, all of whom at the Toledo match that I was at, I believe all of them were in double-digit kills as well. So I've got a nice offensive core being built. Yeah, I'm looking at Megan Lipsky's numbers right now, and it's astounding, to say the least. She had, against Bowling Green, she had 1 fewer digs than Tessa Oyama did, the team's libero. So, kind of put that into context.
Yeah. There's, volleyball's, they're looking all right. I don't think that the win over Bowling Green is a super impressive one, but I think it is a mild upset. Last year, UB was neck and neck at the end of the season with Bowling Green to claim that final spot in the conference tournament. I think Bowling Green is a little worse this year, but I don't think they lost as much as UB did. And I think it is very impressive. We're seeing Cassie Shadow continue to dominate. The one sad point I have here is UB's blocking haven't gotten as many blocks lately as we know that they can. I don't know how much of that is Amber Hatchett being out with a long-term injury, it seems, and how much of it is a change in things, because even as the blocks are going down, the digs and UB's backline defensive responsibilities are going up. The digs are doing well, the passing's going well, and Prinsbach is getting more to work with. Felicia Watkins is still up and down a bit. Her down is no longer a negative hitting percentage, and her up is double-digit kills. I actually should look at Lipsky over the last half dozen games. Because, it's even more than that. She's got double-digit kills in 8 of her last 9 and 10 of her last 12. So that's pretty swell. And most recently, she's hit above 300 or above 250 in everything but the loss against Syracuse over the last 3 weeks or so. So she's rolling. She's counting in the digs. She's got 4 double-doubles. And that's the kind of production we need. That's the kind of production that Talia Bishop brought last year. And that with Bishop leaving, I don't even know where she is now. I legitimately cannot find her. I assume she still had a year of eligibility left. She could have played somewhere. If I felt like there was more to say that I could pass off to you, John, I'd ask you to talk while I went to look it up. But I feel like we don't have.
Yeah, I don't think we have that much to talk about. I did manage to catch a set of the Bowling Green match during halftime of the football game.
Oh, good.
Which I can't even recall which set it was. It was literally just a video feed. There was no stats or anything. I was just watching straight up video. And again, I saw a couple of things. There were a few times. I mentioned this last week against Toledo. Kind of some things that would happen where, a couple of people would run in to try and hit the ball. So it'd be 2 or 3 people just run in and kind of meet each other.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a whole lot of communication there. I saw that a couple of times, but it seemed like it was less frequent than against Toledo. Obviously, I didn't get to watch the whole match, so I can't speak for the other sets. But
yeah, I did watch the Toledo game, and I felt like, compared to the number of times that a ball dropped behind 2 people who didn't even go for it, or the number of times that I remember in the past 2 players running in, I felt like that wasn't as big an issue against Toledo, which was nice. It was still an issue, but after you talked about it, I was able to rewatch the match later, and I'm generally pleased. I don't understand why schools lay their sites out like this, but I think I might have found her, for what it's worth. Oh, she's not. Who is this person talking about? I got someone saying that after putting just 1 senior on the floor, the Pirates. So the East Carolina student newspaper is saying that Talia Bishop is there. But their roster doesn't have her on there. But Chris Rhodes, who was a volunteer assistant with us last year, is on their staff, so I could see her following him. It's not a big deal, I suppose. We're not actually overly concerned with where Talia Bishop is now. But she was so good, it feels like she should be somewhere. Well, the newspaper is lying to us. But given our experience with student newspapers, we're not super surprised by that. Whatever. Volleyball, I think they're on the road. No, they're totally home this weekend. First 2 weekends, we kind of saw the more winnable match be the second. This weekend, they're got Penn State on Friday and Ohio on Saturday. After Penn State and Washington on the first 2 weekends of the season, Ohio is the next best team on UB's schedule, and it's not even close. I think they're ranked now. They're certainly close if they're not. They're the perennial MAC front runner, and they're better than they have been this year. Penn State lost. That's a surprise. Ohio is unofficially 28th now, getting votes in the coaches poll for volleyball. And in terms of ranking, UB's past opponents, Penn State is number 3 and Washington is 6. And Murray State is having a tough year after when we played them. They were a reigning conference champion who made the NCAAs, but they don't look to be in the picture now. So Ohio is the best that UB's seen in a month, and they're one of the best they'll see on their schedule all year. I think they had a big upset of somebody. They might have upset Wisconsin. I know that Miami volleyball upset Michigan State. Anyway, the Saturday night match against Ohio is going to be tough, and that's another one where we'll kind of be looking for small victories. But against Kent State, I think is at least winnable. Number 10 Kentucky was who they beat, so I only know that that's impressive because the number 10 is next to Kentucky, but they beat them. So we're looking at maybe another win and a loss from volleyball, but I'd be pretty pleased with that, to be honest.
I should mention we have been on for about 50 minutes-ish. We should kind of.
Oh, boy. Well.
Hurry it up.
Well, good news is we cross country and men's tennis.
Yeah, cross country was at the Lehigh Paul Short Invitational. Really big takeaway from that is all aboard the Jack Jib hype train. Choo choo. They jumped, I believe, up to 9th in the regional rank, the NCAA regional rankings. We're seeing the Northeast regional rankings.
Yeah. The men, we knew the men were going to be stronger this year. I didn't quite know where the stronger numbers were going to come from. And that for coming from younger guys versus just the returners is really exciting. That Jack Jib, the Jack Jib hype train is because Jack Jib is a national champion as a high schooler and the steeplechase on track. And we're super pumped for him on the track. And obviously, if you're a good track runner, you're at least a decent cross-country runner. He came in first race of the season and immediately stepped in as UB's top runner. Better yet, the men had their entire scoring 5 come in within 33 seconds of each other, which that is how you win. I think their first 4 were in within 7 seconds of each other. So if they can get the rest of that pack in even closer, that's how you win. It's good to have a top runner, someone in the top 10 of races like the MAC Championship, but it's also good and even a little better to have your next few guys in within 20 seconds. It's very hard to do, and it's really exciting when that UB's been able to manage that. They were able to run a tight pack last year, and they're going to be able to do it again this year. Jack Jib is the real deal as a freshman. And the men were already a strong team. They'd been ranked. They started the year ranked 14th in the regional rankings, and I think they had dropped down to 15th, and now they're up to 9th with this. And their next race is the most loaded field that they'll see this season unless they qualify for nationals, which I think is a long shot, but unless they do that. They are going to the pre-nationals invite hosted by Louisville, who is hosting nationals this year. And I don't actually know everyone who's going to be in the meet, but it's a big deal. It'll be a chance for them to put up some times on a legit course and see how they stack up. And the women are also going there. The women are also led by a freshman, Sharday Henry, who is a favorite of John and I for her movie choices. We've brought it up in the past, but Sharday Henry's favorite movie is Goon, which is a tremendous movie. I actually rewatched last week just because we had been talking about it. And it's a great movie. And so we're super pumped for that. Sharday Henry, we've talked about her in the past. She fastest incoming recruit that UB women's cross country has ever brought in, and she's proving it now. She's consistently been Buffalo's number 1. And the women had a big weekend too. They finished the men finished 4th and the women finished 8th, right?
I believe so. 1 second.
Either way, I should know this. We're a little off right now.
The men were in 4th.
Okay, then the women were 8th.
The women were in 8th. That's out of 35 teams.
Yeah. So the women finished 24th last year out of 36. And they had been in the regional rankings for a single week because they had a strong performance at the Iona Meet of Champions last year. Then their poor showing at Paul Short dropped them out. This year they had a pretty good showing at Iona, amazing showing at Paul Short. They also are running a very pack. They also are seeing a number of freshmen, number of youngsters. There's Charlotte Henry, number 1. Rachel Barrich is running at, kind of number 4 or 5 amongst the UB group. And Amy Shaw, who I've been hyping Amy Shaw for a while now because she had a very, very strong track season and is really reaping the benefits of that. This season. And so that's 2 freshmen and a sophomore. Beyond that, you've got Corinne Burchard and, one of the Megans, whether it's Hopkins or Wessel or someone else deeper down, making an impact. And so the women look real strong. They finished 7th in the MAC 3 years running, and I think they make a big jump this year. MAC women's cross country is a little more competitive than MAC men's cross country, but the men were going for top 3 last year and finished in 4th. If any one of their runners had run 3 seconds faster, they would have been 3rd. The women have finished 7th 3 years in a row, but have collectively been faster and scored fewer points and been closer and closer to 6th each year. I think both of them make a pretty big jump up. They still have 2 big races between now and then. Their next one is pre-nationals. Oh, excuse me, no, pre-nationals is the only race between now and the MAC championships, but that's their next race. Both teams in Louisville. They look really good. They look really good. Are either of them MAC championship caliber? I'm not quite sure, but compared to the last 5 or 6 years, this is the strongest they've been in a while, and they do not have many seniors, which is really exciting to see.
One last little note on the Paul Short invitation. The men, they only lost. They were behind only Georgetown and Villanova, which both I know are nationally ranked, and Guelph. And Guelph is a Canadian university who, if I recall correctly, they were the national champions in Canada, or they're one of the better teams in Canada.
The men are national champions 9 times running in Canada.
So,
running, huh? Sorry. Laughing as much at my own stupid joke. Guelph is a big deal in Canadian cross country. I can't believe that I just said that sentence. But they're also pretty big on the women's side. I think their winning streaks are even longer over there. So there's no shame in that. And the men finished 4th. That kind of cut you off to talk about Guelph, but both Georgetown and Wisconsin? Was that the other team?
Villanova.
Okay, both Georgetown and Villanova were ranked, are nationally ranked, excuse me. So UB finished 4th to 2 of the top 20 schools, 2 top 20 teams in the US and the top team in Canada. And that's pretty good. We'll take that anytime. So that's nice. The women were a little bit less successful against things, but they did enough to enter the regional ranking. Oh, God. A tweet I sent out previously was wrong. I'm just remembering that, and it's way too late to go back and fix it now because it's like 3 days old. Anyway, real strong showing. I think of note of the teams that finished ahead of the women, one was Bowling Green, who finished just a spot or 2. I put out a tweet at some point that said the men lost narrowly to Bowling Green, and that was wrong. And now I'm going to think about that and regret it for a couple hours, and I really shouldn't, but I don't like being wrong. But Bowling Green's generally a stronger women's program. I think they are ranked in the 8th or 9th in the Great Lakes region. So it's not bad to be just a notch below them. And I think that the women being so youth heavy might be aiming for a shorter peak. And so they might not yet be close to their peak time later in the month. A real strong program, a real strong experienced runner can hold their peak and run well enough over their career to get into a college program. Can't, but I could see Vicky Mitchell aiming for them to have a narrower peak. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another significant drop-off between now and the MAC championships. Last thing, kind of brief, but men's tennis sent a small 3-person delegation to the ITA All-American Championships, which ITA is the governing body for collegiate tennis. The fall season, we talk about this every time. Fall season in tennis is more geared toward individual performances, and it ends with the ITA Regional Championships in late October, maybe early November, soonish.
Yeah, the end of this month.
End of October. Last year, both the men and the women had real strong showings in the regional championships, especially the men, which saw Pablo Alvarez advance to the round of 16, the first bull ever to do it. Damien David nearly advanced the round of 16. He's now graduated. This year, I don't know if the All-America Championships that's happening right now comes out of last year's regional championships or what, but it's happening now. UB sent Pablo Alvarez, Sergio Alvarez, I don't actually know how to pronounce his name, Arevalo, he's Spanish, Arevalillo, Sergio, and Amar Hromic, who transferred to UB midway through last year. And Hromic and Sergio started in the pre-qualifying rounds, not the main draw and not the qualifying, but the pre-qualifying round of singles. They each won their first match. Pretty impressive showing from both of them. Amar Hromic beat a freshman from Ohio State who is a 5-star recruit and undefeated in high school. And I don't actually remember who Sergio beat, but Sergio won a tighter match, and then each lost in their second match. Amar Hromic I think lost on a fourth tiebreaker in the third set, which at that point the match is pretty much a coin flip. Sergio lost a little more decisively. In doubles, I'm pretty sure they lost pretty quickly in both their first match and the consolation. And when Pablo got up, Pablo's first match was against someone who had fought his way out of the pre-qualifying bracket, but came from a region that was so strong that even though he was bumped down into this lower level, he was coming from Arkansas, and Coach Nickel told us on Twitter that region is so strong that region has 20 or 30 guys who are at the level, who are well above, UB's showings. And so even though Pablo auto-qualified for the qualifying round, he got knocked out 6-0, 6-1, which is an absolute ass-whooping in tennis. And then he also lost his consolation match. I don't know. Everyone was guaranteed 2 matches, and he lost his second as well. But we got a couple wins in singles, and if nothing else, that kind of experience is going to help these guys' composure later in the year. They continue to play well. They're going to be defending a MAC championship this year, which is really exciting. And I think what we're looking for now, we've had for a couple years, 5 or 6 years, a team that was good enough to win a MAC championship, and they finally broke through this year. Things like this and things like they're showing last year in New York City at the All-American or the ITA regionals are chances for these guys to play in bigger matches against big-time opponents and grow more comfortable so that they can be more consistent in the MAC tournament. I think they're competing again this weekend. Honestly, I think they're against Binghamton. There's a Binghamton invite this weekend, which is exciting. Oh, Ivy Plus is this weekend too. Well, they'll be in a split squad. Is that right? Nope, that's last weekend. Dartmouth, excuse me. Dartmouth might get our school name right, John, this year.
I mean, I hope it's something better than the Buffalo University Buffaloes.
Yeah, well.
That hashtag Ivy League.
So for that joke, last year in the spring, Dartmouth men's tennis proclaimed on Twitter that their match against the Buffalo University Buffaloes was starting soon, which is so wrong. The only thing they got right in that whole sentence was the word Buffalo. So we have a laugh at Dartmouth's expense.
Yeah.
Whenever
I imagine one of them sitting there with like a monocle and a top hat on, saying, in some pretentious accent, saying like, asking what our school mascot is, and so, they're from Buffalo. Call them the Buffaloes or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I just don't know what to make of that. Men's tennis really had a lot of funny moments last year. There was that. There was when they were doing halftime blurbs in basketball games of interviewing the other coaches. And Sal Capaccio asked Nils Nickel, how their preseason action was going, and Coach Nickel was like, "Well, we've had 8 matches already." It was just like, oh man, poor Coach Nails. So men's tennis, hooray! They're done, so they'll be coming home soon, and they're going to Dartmouth this weekend, which they'll probably play, if I remember last year's format right, they'll probably play 4 different teams in loosely a team versus team structure. But really, we're going to be looking for individual results. And so that'll be exciting. I think last year they played Dartmouth, Boston College, maybe Bryant at the Dartmouth Invitational. Oh, they didn't go to Dartmouth. They went to Penn last year. Well, never mind then. Whatever it was, they'll be going to Dartmouth. They'll play a handful of schools. And what we'll really be looking for is individual results. And then after that is the ITA regionals, which is kind of what everything in the fall works up to. And there is a competition after that, but that's a little different. With that, we're kind of done. We're trying to do something new, kind of old. When we put the show on hiatus, but still wanted to keep a weekly Olympic update last spring, we did a banter post where we just kind of wrote down our conversations, and that was met to mixed reviews. Not really any better or worse than this podcast is. But something we did there was talked about our bowls of the week, and UB Athletics every Monday releases their bowls of the week, and they're usually pretty predictable, and I don't think much of it. But we also should do that and not just parrot what UB has to say. So normally when we broadcast on a Sunday, we'll be beating UB to the punch. When we, on rare occasions, hopefully this is only a one-time thing, push our podcast back to Tuesday. I don't even know who they picked. Probably Megan Lipsky and Russell Cicerone, probably. Which is interesting because there's no football in that pairing. Anyway, while John looks that up, we're gonna do bowls of the week now, and I'm saying this with such high energy, and I'm really actually am excited to cover UB and talk about things and give bowls of the week to close out a podcast. But
it was Cicerone, absolutely.
Well, maybe we'll go with someone different. I don't know. So what we're gonna do, John suggested picking one gent and one lady to keep things even. And generally throughout the year, we've got an equal number of folks competing. In the dead zone of November and December, when we've only got wrestling, well, then we've only got wrestling and one swimming meet over 2 months. But otherwise, I think that'll generally work out. John, why don't you go first? We've talked about most people, I think. I think this show is a little less to go on, but we've talked about most people.
Okay, so for my male bowl of the week, I'm gonna go with Jack Jibb from the cross country team. He led UB at the Paul Short Invitational. I've hopped on that hype train. I hope everyone else hops on that hype train right quick, because he is going to be a star. On the women's side, this one's a little bit tougher. I think I'm going to go with Carissa Catrona. She had her second goal against her second goal of the year against Bowling Green. I think she put up a ridiculous number of shots. Not really ridiculous, but 5 shots, 3 on goal. She's starting to heat up as of late. I really hope that this carries over and she starts becoming that sort of Katie Roberts type where we can count on her scoring like a goal a game. So those are my choices.
Yeah, that's a more qualitative approach than what we got from UB, which they always kind of go with the numbers. Unfortunately, as I say that, I am going to go with Megan Lipsky for the women's side, our women's athlete of the week. And that is mostly an appreciation for just how good she's been now. I think the knock on her preseason, that when I expressed doubt about the team, was can Lipsky perform night in and night out? And I didn't really think she could. For women's volleyball to be successful, she has to. And now over 2-3 weeks running, she has been. 4 double-doubles in a row is solid. And not only is she racking up lots of kills, but she's doing it on relatively few errors. I think her last 3 matches, she's hit 298, 324, and 358. I think I had the stats up earlier. She is lighting it up, and she is being the player that UB needs her to be, so that other freshmen can play well, and so that it just all gels together. And she's starring right now, and that's something that UB absolutely needs, and it gives them a chance against a good portion of MAC teams. Maybe not the entire MAC, but last year they had 6 wins, and this year they look like they'll have I hope more than 4. They've got a bunch of chances left to get 2 more to get to 4, and I'd be pretty happy, given what was lost in the transition, to see volleyball get up to 4 or 5 wins. On the men's side, I'm going to go with Itai De La Vega, swimming, hitting that NCAA B cut, and in his very first swim, is a big deal, especially considering just how slow compared to their season bests or last year's MAC championship times they were last year. And I want to look up, I should have had this ready while you were talking, and I didn't. And that's my fault. But last year, in his opening breaststroke, he swam 57.68. And his best time for the season in the 100 breast was 54. So if he drops 3 seconds this year, I don't actually know the A cuts. Let's find them here. I'm looking to see if he has a similar drop this year, if he'll be in line for an A cut. And A cut is 52.29. So if he drops 3 seconds this year, like he dropped 3 seconds last year, he'll hit the A cut on the dot. So that should put that into perspective of how wonderful and how strong of an opening this was for Itai De La Vega. And we're hoping for this to be a little bit of a smoother segment, and in the future will be. We're still adjusting, just a tough weekend around. But Itai De La Vega hitting that B cut to start the season is no joke. Across the board, everyone's times were 3 or 4 or more seconds slower than we see when they're at their peak. And if he's hitting that B cut already at the start of the season, we could see him, probably will. I'd put it at 70-30 right now that we will see him in the NCAA championships this year. That's not a guarantee. I'm going to hold back on that for now. But real big showing to start the season, Itai De La Vega. And could happen. We could see him hit an NCAA 8 cut, which would be very, very exciting. That would, of course, mean lowering the school record in the process as well. So Jib, all aboard the hype train, and Charisma Catrona, and I've got Megan Lipsky falling in line with UB Athletics and Itai De La Vega. Those are our bowls of the week. Everything in general we'll try to have more smooth in the future, that in particular. But that's a new feature we want to try and get going. It'll mean we'll have to pace ourselves better than we have tonight. But we've done it. It's in the past. It's in the past for everybody. the near past for us, the further past for you when you watch this later in the week, because no one watches this live. But hello, have a good week. I'm Matt Gritzmacher for UB Bull Run and John McWhinney. This was the Olympic Sports Podcast, normally Sundays at 10 p.m. That's our plan usually, that this was a special Tuesday edition because real life happened on Sunday and this weekend. Next week, we'll be back on Sunday. We'll be talking a couple home matches for men's soccer and volleyball, a road and a home match for women's soccer. I think both tennis teams are in competition. I actually think women's tennis is hosting, talk about them. And rowing's got a regatta in Connecticut that we'll do the best we can to actually talk about rowing. Again, for UB Bull Run, John McWhinney, I'm Matt Gritzmacher. This was the Olympic Sports Rundown. And have a good rest of the week that's already started. Have a good one.